In 1965, not many believe the Vietnam conflict will escalate into a full-scale war. One early sign is America's bombing of secret targets in Laos. Military jets fly over a quiet farming area during the day, dropping bombs that destroy the fields, houses, and crops in their path. On the USS Ranger in the Gulf of Tonkin, Navy pilot Dengler and his squadron attend a pre-mission briefing. The squad is ordered to fly over northern Vietnam to cut off enemy supply lines. Since the mission is classified, they are told not to talk about it with anyone, not even family. To prepare, they watch a survival video that explains how to hide with leaves and signal planes, but they find it silly. The squad is given the chance to request changes to their gear and rations. Dengler asks for a hidden flap in his Navy boots to conceal his American passport during the mission. At the final briefing, the squad leader reminds everyone about safety. He warns them not to use their military radios if they are in danger because the enemy has been intercepting signals and ambushing rescuers. Dengler is selected as the mission leader. On mission day, Dengler and his close friends follow a ritual where they press their foreheads against a wall to wish each other luck. 4 fighter jets take off toward Laos in North Vietnam. As the squad starts bombing the target area, locals fire back immediately, and Dengler's jet is hit. The left wing starts tearing off, and Dengler uses his piloting skills to crash land the jet. He jumps out and makes it to the ground safely, but Lao soldiers are already after him. Dengler runs through a field and hides in the jungle. Remembering the survival video, he hides under a pile of plants until the soldiers head in another direction. He leaves his military radio under some leaves before going deeper into the jungle. Eventually, Dengler finds an abandoned structure and steals some food from a pot. He begins sleeping in a plastic bag, covering it with leaves for camouflage. When Dengler hears a US helicopter flying overhead, he cautiously leaves his hiding spot. He waits for a local family to pass by before climbing onto a rock and using a small mirror to signal the helicopter. Unfortunately, the helicopter is already gone. Later, Dengler drinks from a river to cool off from the intense heat, but he lets his guard down. This gives the Lao forces enough time to surround and capture him. At first, Dengler is brought to a nearby village where no one speaks English. He's tied up in the center of the village, and when he asks to use the bathroom, they ignore him, so he ends up going in his pants. He spends the entire day on the ground while the villagers stare at him like he's an animal. A kid even teases him by dangling an insect in front of his face. The next morning, Dengler is taken away again. This time, the group crosses a bridge to another section of the jungle. When they stop to rest, Dengler watches the men build a fire, trying to learn their method. Sometimes helicopters fly by, but the men always drag Dengler into the bushes to avoid being spotted. During these breaks, the captors torment him. They tie him to a tree and shoot near him, intentionally missing, just to scare him and mess with his mind. The gunshots leave him temporarily deaf. After hours of walking through fields and hiding from helicopters, they reach another village. Dengler is thrown into a truck and driven to the capital of Laos. There, he's dragged into a fancy house where he meets the provincial governor. Unlike the soldiers, the governor treats Dengler kindly and speaks English. He offers Dengler water, unfazed by the sounds of explosions in the distance. Dengler tries to hide that he's an American Navy officer, but the governor sees through his lie. Dengler is forced to show his US passport, which he had hidden in the secret flap of his boots. The governor offers Dengler freedom and safety if he signs a document condemning America and its war against Laos. Dengler refuses to betray his country, so he's sent away. Afterward, Dengler is brutally mistreated. He's tied to a farm animal and dragged through the village, leaving him covered in injuries. Then he's hung upside down from a tree, shaken violently and spun around. Later, he's put in a well and repeatedly pushed underwater. Eventually, Dengler is taken to a prison camp. His shoes are removed, and he's shoved into a shack for the night with his feet locked in a heavy restraint. He hears voices through the wall warning him not to mess with the guards because they're dangerous. The next morning, Dengler is freed to walk around the camp. He meets other prisoners, YC, Fiset, and Proset, who are foreigners, and De Bruin and Martin, who are fellow American pilots. To his shock, some of them have been imprisoned for years. De Bruin takes Dengler for a walk around the camp to explain how things work. He points out the guards and tells Dengler the best way to survive is to keep his head down and avoid trouble. The prisoners are allowed to roam the camp during the mornings, but at night, they're locked inside the shack with their hands cuffed together and their feet trapped in heavy restraints. Inside the shack, they can talk freely without the guards overhearing them. Dengler tries to convince the others to come up with an escape plan, but they think it's a terrible idea. They explain that the jungle's intense tropical heat makes survival impossible without water, and the rainy season is still months away. On top of that, escaping at night would mean dealing with their restraints while avoiding the guards. Despite their doubts, Dengler doesn't give up and persuades the group to help him get a nail. The group creates a distraction by scattering around the camp, forcing the guards to chase after them. Only one guard, who isn't very smart, stays behind. Dengler talks to him in a friendly way to distract him and manages to steal a nail from a beam. Later in the shack, Dengler uses rocks to sharpen the nail into a point and then uses it to pick the locks on their restraints. This gives the prisoners some freedom at night, and they finally start believing Dengler might come up with a good escape plan. The next morning, fighter jets fly over the camp, which angers the guards. In a fit of rage, one of them shoots at Martin. Luckily, the bullet only grazes his head, leaving a scar. The guards then mock the prisoners by threatening to shoot them for fun, laughing at their fear. As time goes on, Dengler learns more about his fellow prisoners. They've kept the label from a can of beans just to remember its smell, and they share stories about why they became pilots. One evening, De Bruin tells Dengler he doesn't trust his plan and thinks it will get them all killed. De Bruin even warns that if anyone tries to escape, he'll scream and alert the guards. The next day, a group of Vietnamese soldiers visits the camp to check the prisoners for useful information. A female soldier finds Dengler's shaving glass, and he flirts with her, gifting it to her. Later, he jokes with the others, saying he wishes he wasn't engaged and there wasn't a war, so he could be with her. Suddenly, one of the guards loses control of his weapon, which fires wildly, forcing everyone to run for cover. Dengler stays at the table, staring at a few rice grains that fell from a plate, sparking an idea. Weeks later, the prisoners surprise Dengler by singing him "Happy Birthday" and giving him a drink they made from insects. Touched by their gesture, Dengler decides to give them something in return. He reveals he's made 2 rough knives out of old bullet casings and offers them to his friends, letting them guess which hand holds each knife to win them. Dengler reveals he's been saving a bit of rice every day because he's come up with a new plan. He's noticed that during their lunch breaks, the guards leave their weapons behind, so he suggests they steal the weapons and take over the camp. Once in control, they can signal US helicopters for rescue. The prisoners agree to carry out the plan on July 4th, giving it extra meaning. With just over a month to prepare, they begin studying the guards' routines using Dengler's small mirror through the roof. They mark the positions of the guards and their weapons with wood and rocks to help memorize them. One night, when a guard nearly catches them in the act, they pretend they're just playing a game. Using the knives Dengler made, the prisoners create an escape hatch in the floor of their shack. Every night, Dengler carefully sneaks out through the hatch to map the path they'll take and loosens a section of the outer fence. As the days go by, food becomes even scarcer. The small guard Dengler befriended still saves him a small ball of rice, but eventually the guards stop bringing food altogether and serve them bowls of worms instead. De Bruin says he'll eat his rice, but Dengler reminds him that he holds the nail and won't free him from the handcuffs during their escape if De Bruin eats it. Dengler is so sure of his plan that he eats the worms without hesitation. One morning, they hear helicopters flying by, but the guards fire warning shots at the ground to keep them quiet. After the guards leave, Martin has an emotional breakdown, and Dengler reassures him that they'll be gone soon. One day, YC overhears the guards talking and translates for the group. The guards are also struggling with the lack of food and plan to kill the prisoners, making it look like an escape attempt. They want to return to their villages. This forces the prisoners to move up their plan to the next day, instead of waiting for the original date. The next morning, the escape begins. The prisoners split into 2 groups, Dengler and Martin in one, and De Bruin with the rest. Each group is supposed to head in separate directions and meet in the kitchen to subdue the guards. Dengler goes out first and quickly collects the guns the guards left behind, bringing them back to the group. Once everyone is armed, they split up. When Dengler and Martin reach the kitchen, they find they're the only ones there, which isn't enough to take on all the guards. Thinking quickly, they open fire, killing all the guards except the small one who had been kind to Dengler. Dengler lets him go as a gesture of gratitude for the rice. Realizing they can't stay at the camp, Dengler and Martin gather as much food as they can and run into the jungle. Along the way, they cross paths with De Bruin and YC. Dengler grows suspicious when he notices De Bruin has extra weapons and shoes while the others are missing. De Bruin insists it's just a coincidence, but Dengler is disappointed. He trades some ammo for De Bruin's machete before they part ways, each group heading in opposite directions. Dengler and Martin continue their escape through the jungle, aiming to reach Thailand. The rainy season begins, giving them plenty of water and helping them survive on their remaining rice. However, during a lunch break, a sudden mudslide sweeps them down a hill, causing them to lose all their rice. After many days of walking, they finally reach a river. Remembering the survival video, they build a raft from materials they find in the jungle. At first, the raft carries them smoothly while they stay hidden under leaves, but soon the current pushes them toward dangerous rapids leading to a waterfall. Spotting it just in time, they jump off and swim to shore, leaving the raft to crash on the rocks below. As days pass, the duo continues their journey through the jungle, constantly soaked by the endless rain. One afternoon, they discover leeches clinging to their skin under their clothes. They painfully remove them one by one, their weakened bodies making the process even harder. Later, they spot a fisherman nearby but avoid making noise to stay unnoticed, as firing a weapon might alert soldiers. Realizing their guns are more of a burden now, they toss them into the river to lighten their load. Along the way, Dengler finds an old shoe and gives it to Martin, who is struggling and feeling weak. Dengler hopes it will lift Martin's spirits. After more exhausting walking, they come across an abandoned village and decide to rest there. While they're taking a break, a few US helicopters fly overhead. Dengler waves and yells for help, but the helicopters don't see them and keep going. Martin begins to lose his grip on reality, so Dengler tells him to rest while he starts a fire using the technique he learned from the locals. He burns the huts in the village to create a massive smoke signal for the helicopters. However, the Americans mistake them for enemies and fire at them instead. Dengler has to run to avoid getting hit. Worried that the smoke might attract locals, Dengler and Martin decide to move on. Martin grows so weak that Dengler has to help him walk. They eventually agree to surrender at the nearest village, hoping for food and mercy. When they arrive, they show they mean no harm and beg for help, but the villagers view them as enemies. Without hesitation, they kill Martin. Angry and desperate, Dengler grabs his machete and starts swinging it wildly, scaring the villagers enough to back off. Taking advantage of their fear, he grabs Martin's shoe and runs into the jungle. The villagers soon come after him, but Dengler manages to hide in the bushes. Days pass, and exhaustion and hunger begin to take a toll on him. He starts hallucinating, imagining Martin's ghost is with him. Dengler stays near the riverbank and carefully avoids locals. Whenever they leave, he sneaks out to steal any scraps of food they've left behind. On some days, he hunts animals, even catching a snake and eating it raw to survive. One morning, a US scout plane flies overhead. Remembering the survival video, Dengler waves a large leaf to get the pilot's attention. At first, the plane seems to ignore him, but soon 2 helicopters arrive and rescue him. As they prepare to leave, some villagers attack, but the American soldiers shoot back and take off safely. One soldier confirms Dengler's identity and gives him a candy bar. Once at the US base, Dengler is taken to the hospital to recover. Because his mission was classified, 2 CIA agents monitor him constantly. They won't let him share his story with anyone and repeatedly question him for information. Dengler wants to return to his squad, but the CIA refuses to let him leave. One afternoon, Dengler's squad shows up at the hospital with a birthday cake on a pushcart and a letter from Dengler's fiancée. They pretend it's his birthday, convincing the CIA agents to give them a few moments alone to celebrate. The squad puts their plan into action. As they leave the base, pushing the cart, the CIA agents suspect nothing. Once outside, they reveal Dengler is hidden inside the cart and quickly help him board a helicopter to escape. Later, Dengler finally returns to his naval ship. As he steps aboard, the entire crew gathers to welcome him with loud cheers, celebrating his survival and homecoming. Don't forget to subscribe. Here's some more interesting story you don't want to miss.